Now, when we began, or before we began the journey of Break the Cycle, I sat down with a friend of mine who's going to speak to us now to end our conference today, Michael Hastings, Lord Michael Hastings. I've known Michael for years and years and years, and he's constantly a sense of encouragement to me, opening up relationships and opportunities, and also a giant source of wisdom. So we couldn't think of anything better than to close today's conference by giving Michael the opportunity to sum up where we've got to and what the challenge is ahead of us. And then we're actually going to finish beyond that with a poem from two young people who are part of Dwayne's school. A little poem from them just to finish with. But over right now to you, Michael.
Steve, thank you so very much. And I've been on the conference from the beginning today and stayed for every second and every minute. And I want to start by thanking you, Steve, and the entire Oasis team for this journey of the last 3 and a bit years, when we thought we could begin to make a difference to the appropriate inclusion, and let me use the strange word, colorization, of the leadership of Oasis schools and of a multitude of other academies and schools across the UK. We had a blank sheet, but a great amount of will. And one of the most essential components of all of that was to encourage people who would look at teaching and education from afar and wonder, is that for me? And to believe it is for you. It is possible to lead, to direct, to engage, to teach, to participate, to inspire, to enable, and to be at the core of probably one of the most potent means for changing a society and a community. So thank you, Steve. Thank you, Oasis. Thank you to all of the heads and assistant heads who've taken part. And I just love the conversation just now with Josephine. She's walked the journey, the difficult journey, but therein lies the opportunity for all of us. Walk the journey, do the talk. So we've said so much about race, inclusion, the battles, the issues, the curriculum, decolonization, so much about that. So I want to probably try and combine the realities of what we're all watching and hearing every single day on our screens and in our radios and online with the pressure that we've been trying to apply through Break the Cycle to re-energize a more inclusive and diverse curriculum and educational experience. Of course, many of you know I began my working career as a school teacher, and I absolutely loved it. I really did, until I got hoiked out to work alongside the Thatcher government way back in the 1980s, not as a member of the Conservative Party, and I never was and never have been, but as somebody willing to engage in what had been the very, very difficult outcomes for Black and minority communities in 1981 and 1985 as a consequence of high unemployment, changes to the nature of our economy, and the need to engage Black communities not in turbulence, rioting, and disturbance, but in partnership, working together, building positive futures. Last weekend, I had the absolute immense pleasure of meeting again, as I do actually 3 or 4 times every year, with one of my former pupils. Lisa and I have known each other for 43 years, since I taught her religious studies in a school in West London. And I've stayed on the journey of seeing her growth and her transformation now to a chief executive of a very significant legal charity impacting thousands of lives across the UK. What they all said to me as I sat in the gala event celebrating 30 years of the Child Brain Injury Trust and 20 years of her as chief executive is, when I remember looking at her way back then as a 13-year-old in a classroom with me as a teacher, a new teacher, could I have seen at that moment what a phenomenal, inspiring, dedicated, and significant leader she would become? No, I couldn't have seen it. But what I needed to do was to seed everything I could possibly give her to lift her aspirations and her hopes. And that is one of the most important dimensions of all of education, is we who are teachers, who are involved in schools, who are head teachers, who are lecturers, who are involved in universities and colleges. Our most critical job is to inspire, to motivate, and to breed curiosity, to make sure that we don't just tick all the right boxes which say this school is diverse and inclusive, but rather that our students, our pupils, are motivated, energized to go and look for themselves, to discover for themselves, and to create a meaningful, positive future for themselves. I was sent a very difficult picture, literally about half an hour ago. Use your imagination. I won't attempt to put it up here, but it's a picture of a train platform. It is literally the better part, and I'm taking a guesstimate here, of something like 25 feet deep of people and something in the region of 200 feet deep, long, and 25 deep of people cramming to get onto what looks like a very old train. The picture has this caption: "This is not a photo from 1941. This is a photo from March 2022 with all the color taken out. I'm so angry. I'm so sad," says the person who sent it. Here we are again, repeating history. A history we thought was long gone, long forgotten, way behind us, way beyond us. It would never happen again. We talk a lot about Vladimir Putin. Well, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, who was born in 1870 and died in 1924, said around about the turn of 1900, a very important quote: "There are decades when nothing happens, and then there are weeks where decades happen." It's felt like that the last 2 weeks, that we've seen not a recovery of something great from the past, but something chillingly, disastrously destructive, evil, and deathly from the past. How is this to help us as we think about inclusion, diversity, the place of minority students in our schools? How is this to help us as we think about the futures that we need to be prepared for? Somebody said earlier on in this conversation, I remember in Steve interviewing my very good friend Baroness Amos, look at those images of Black students being pushed away from trains in Ukraine and white Ukrainians being encouraged on. The instinct within all of us to laser people with a different eye, to look at them not through the welcoming, receiving, beautiful, embracing sense of "you're just like me irrespective," but rather "you're different to me, so I take a different perspective." That still remains a vivid and real challenge, a huge challenge for all of us. What I've always encouraged the students at the university where I was the chancellor, the students at the university where I'm the chairman now at SOAS, the students that I taught in school, is to be constantly curious to know and to understand. When I know and understand, when I engage and think, when I dig deep and dive, when I understand, I cease to divide from people. Instead, I seek to move towards people. I know this is a strange quote from an American Secretary of State for Defense, Donald Rumsfeld. Many of you remember him, but it does make an important point. Do you remember when he said this? There are known knowns. There are things we know that we know. There are known unknowns. That is to say, there are things we know we don't know. But there are also unknown unknowns. There are things we don't know that we don't know. Now, don't be confused by that. Take the heart of it. We think we've got the world sewn up, or didn't we think that? Maybe 3 weeks ago, even 3 months ago. Post-millennium, everything was going to be fantastic and brilliant. Well, we got whacked with coronavirus, and now we've been triple whacked with the tragedy in Ukraine. And we've seen in the midst of it how easy it is for what we thought were old ideologies, past prejudices, to come back to the fore, to dominate our world agenda. If we're going to develop a genuinely inclusive curriculum, a genuinely inclusive leadership, a genuinely inclusive platform for teachers, a genuinely inclusive mindset for young people, we must understand the aegis of the past and the pull of the future. We've got to get a grip on understanding how we get to this place of opinion and how we change opinions so that we can deliver a more positive and purposeful future. I was reminded of this point by no less a man than Albert Einstein. The world will not be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything. If there was one story to be told of the post-war generations, Second World War, I mean, it is that we've been lulled into a sense of ease and comfort. And then these things around diversity, inclusion, become the battlegrounds for transformation. But if instead of, at the end of the Second World War, where we watched nations that may look similar, but people who came to fight from every corner, from Africa, from the Caribbean, from Asian countries, to fight around every corner to end that war, instead of looking at them as people who had cultural differences, ethnic differences, we saw them in the true word as allies of positive freedoms. Then we would build the relationships which maintain that into the long term. Maybe one of the horrendous lessons of this conflict is that so many of those relationships that could have been better built were sidelined by positions of dismay and authority. We have to ask ourselves, what could we have done differently? That is never to excuse evil, but what could we have done differently? One of the painful lessons of the past is this from Martin Niemöller, who wrote in 1946. First, they came for the socialists, and I didn't speak out because I was not a socialist. And then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak out because I was not a trade unionist. And then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. The things we care so deeply about to bring equity, equality, and opportunity require us to speak out and to speak up. That's what we've been doing through Break the Cycle. But it needs more of us to participate in the positive story that has to be created. Not just rewriting history, but rather creating positive futures. We have to understand things to see their course of action. We need to pursue things to create a better course of action. One of the things I came to understand today, which I didn't know, I have to be honest, was that nestled between Ukraine and Moldova is another country called Transnistria. I'd never heard of it. But as I looked into this 250-mile long country, with its 300,000 people, I saw a region on the edge of Ukraine, buffeted up against Moldova, that is solidly pro-Russian. That has implications. Without knowing that, I may not understand what might be the next wave in this evil conflict? I leave it for you to look it up yourself. But when we understand the impact of historical drivers, when we understand the attitudes and behaviors that have determined why prejudice is so embedded, why discriminations are so difficult to get over, we can redesign a future in a different way. I went to check yesterday what the World Economic Forum is now saying are the essential skills required for 2025 to 2030. The first of these skills, they say, is analytical thinking and innovation. Now, analytical thinking means that I've understood all the context and I've planned a better future of innovation to head towards. Second skill, active learning and learning strategies. In other words, I want to know so that I can, with you, be better. Complex problem solving, number 3. So now that I've understood better, and now that I've learned more, and my curiosity is not just teased and tickled, but is being embedded, I will create problem solving strategies. Number 4, critical thinking and analysis. I will work with you to think through how we can achieve this change. And therefore, number 5, leadership and clear social influence, using technology, bringing design and programming, empowering with resilience, and lastly, reasoning. These skills are so important if we are to develop an education, a culture that's inclusive, competent, delivers results and outcomes, and respectful and respected by the society around us. We're on a difficult and long journey. All of us are. Break the Barrier is 3.5 years old, and I believe it's got to be 30 years old, as long as Steve and I have known each other. We have to keep up the fight to bring people to the forefront. But we don't just want to tick boxes and make sure there are more visibly brown and black and Asian people. We want to make sure that we bring with that great imagination, curiosity, and intrigue and fascination. We make education a rich place to learn because we're bringing the gems yet unseen. We're ending the tiredness of the past. My last quote, Professor Mohammed Yunus, who created what has become in many ways the biggest bank in the world, the Grameen Bank, the bank of the poor. He said this: you have a choice. You and I, you have a choice. You can live in a world already built, or you can build the world you want to live in. That is what breaking the barriers is all about. Creating the world we want to live in. Inclusive, open, diverse, intriguing, positive, captivating, imaginative, wonderful. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Michael. As inspiring and thought-provoking as ever. Thank you so much, Michael. Much appreciated.